All right, trying my first ever car vlog. Here I am imitating Chocolate Knox, trying to see if I can make this work, how the quality sounds before I invest in one of those nice mics. Because I think that, like David said, like this is the future. I think the thing that I want to talk about, though, that has been one of the hardest things to watch lately has been the shift going on in the reformed world that seems like we're buying into the 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 order of things that says that power and coercive authority is the way that a society is formed. And so unless we get the right people into the positions of coercive power, so that would be both the bureaucrats in the government right now, since that's a major point of how we're ruled, but the bureaucrats and the judges and the president, that unless we get the right people into those positions of power, that we're not going to be able to form this society into what we want it to be. And I think the reason that frustrates me is because it is buying into the mechanistic, the Machiavellian, the metaphysic that says that society is formed by force, that the force in the society is what gives it its shape, the same sort of way that a giraffe is formed by the force of nature in evolution, or a puddle is formed by the force of physics that the solid exerts onto the liquid. Society is formed that way, and that's just not the case. Society isn't that kind of place. Society is actually formed by what it loves, and then the love ends up informing the hatred. And because it's a human society, right? We're humans made in the image of the triune God. And so society actually flows out of our loves. And right now, that's what's disordered in our society. And so all of any attempts that don't take into account the fact that we need a long-term formation of loves in our society in is something that isn't going to work in the long run. So it doesn't matter. And we saw this with the push by conservatives, where they convinced everybody that if another Democrat got it, if another Democrat got elected, then it was the end. I remember the rhetoric. It was going to be the end of America as we know it if another Democrat gets elected, and George Bush Jr. George W. Bush gets elected. And everything continued in the same direction because because Christians and conservatives weren't playing the long game. They were letting go of education of children. They were letting go of all of that. And I think you're starting to wake up to the fact that you have to form the loves of children according to reality, right? What is really actually lovely and lovable, what ought to be loved by all humans, and and let them actually grow in their love of good things. And you see that Western civilization is being lost because it's being it's in books on shelves. It's not in the hearts of the next generation. We want to, and that leaves people susceptible to the way people can come in and say, let me tell you the terrible things that people in the West have done throughout history. And the reality is that's never been a question. That Western civilization has never thought that it didn't have some bad actors, some terrible things in it that we didn't have throughout our history, awful things that people in the West have done. and that was the reason that in the West there was a search for the tree, the good and the beautiful, was because we could see what happened when humans weren't stretching and searching for the tree, the good and the beautiful. When they weren't, they did awful things to one another. They did awful things. They did awful things to the world. And because of that realization, the Western civilization started putting a lot of energy into educating its children on searching for the true, the good, and the beautiful, for searching for the good of our neighbor, for hunting to find what the thing in our neighbor was that we could learn about who God was, the nature of reality. And when we had peace with our neighbor, how much more we could build, right? And how much more we could produce when we saw our neighbor as somebody to serve rather than a competition for resources. We saw how much more we as a society could build. And so, because we knew people would do awful things to one another if left to themselves, we put a lot of energy into learning and hunting and seeing that our children wanted what was true and good and beautiful, right? Ordering their loves rightly, according to the African bishop, Augustine of Hippo. He was a bishop in North Africa. I think he was Italian. His family was from the Italian people, but he served the church down in Africa. And he taught us about the importance of our loves being ordered according to the reality of what was more lovable than other things. And God was the only being that could be loved for his own sake. He was the greatest of all possible beings. He was the uncreated creator. He is the sustainer, the redeemer, and he existed as the triune God, a community of love from all eternity, a community of self-giving from all eternity. And so because of that, he could be loved for his own sake, whereas everything else was a dependent being and needed to be loved in its own order for the truth, the beauty, and the goodness that was put on display in the world through them. And then other things ought to be loved too, but in their own proper way. So you can love asparagus, but you can't love asparagus more than you love your neighbor. You can't love cookies more than you love your wife, that sort of thing. You have to love things in their right order. And that is what forms society into free people, because they're freed from slavery to unwanted loves, or freed from slavery from disordered loves, and freed to actually live in the world as they find it, to be wise in the world as they find it. And coercive force has its place in that world because of that wicked and evilness, the way that we treat one another. But it is down the road from the formational aspects, from the discipline that a family gives, from a discipline that a church gives, from the self-discipline that grows up within us. And the coercion, what it's supposed to do is make space for living in, make space for being the kind of people that we can become. And then also, when somebody, for example, steals, the coercive power comes in and stops them, or finds them afterward and makes them pay back what they've taken. If somebody murders, it makes them pay back what they've taken, and whether that's life, or if it's first degree murder, or if it's second degree murder, then they pay back to the wife what the husband would have earned, that sort of thing, right? To balance the scales of justice, who's supposed to be blind, right? That's what the coercive power in the West has been seen. That's been its job, but it isn't forming the society. These next set of elections come up. It's important to remember what kind of world we live in. When we're faithful to the Lord, then he blesses us and we are the head and not the tail. And it doesn't matter if we get all of the votes to the right person if we're not faithful to God, because we end up the tail and not the head anyway, because that's the kind of world it is. We don't live in a mechanistic universe. So, all right, here's my first of hopefully many of these driving vlogs, and have a great day.